of planes flying over in the past week, and the skies have just been totally whited out. So I think they're kind of using the fog as an excuse. But I got some surfing in. It's been beautiful here, except for today. So that's what I've been up to. How are you doing, Zen?
Doing well. I was just writing in this Seekers of Lost Paradise book a poem called Septic Skies. And I was talking about in that how it is that every time right before the rains come, the there's an army, an air force of planes that crisscross the skies and put up tic-tac-toe patterns, which, of course are completely unnatural, but how they are doing that stratosophic aerosol injection and how all that's been going on for so very long and how much that has to have cost. I mean, the expense of doing that for years and years and years over in multiple metropolitan areas. Certainly here in Atlanta, it happens all the time right before the rainstorms. Is that a pattern that you guys recognize as well? Lisa, you first, and then we'll go to Brett.
Oh, yes, for sure. And because we're outside a lot, like I'm at the beach at least like every other day, so I'm always looking up in the sky to see where the clouds are coming near, what's going on. And
Yeah,
there's been so many stripes, and it's a lot lower here, I noticed, than in the main than when they spray in the mainland. Like when we were visiting you guys in Georgia, I noticed it's way up high, and then when you fly into the airport, it's clear, and then you fly through this like gray blanket of clouds, and you get to the airport and the weather's totally different below than it is up where you're flying in the plane. But here it's
uh,
like I think it's maybe because the firmament's quite a bit lower here or something where
yeah,
we can see it a lot clearer to me. And we have an airport right near our home where the Coast Guard is located at, and I think that's where all the planes are taking off from because we can see them flying early in the morning and then landing around in the afternoon, and then the sky is totally white. So it's just crazy. I can't believe how long they've been doing this too, and just it seems like
yeah,
only recently people are noticing.
right. Yeah, just real quick comment. I think perhaps another reason for their low flying over where you are is the Hawaiian Islands are smaller in size and scale than these huge, large cities in the inner part of the United States that are all connected together, and then a lot of what they would spray would end up on in the oceans and in the water, whereas here, all of what they spray comes down in the rain and litters the soil and also is vaporized on the pavement and people breathing in get sick, that kind of thing. But Brett, how are you, brother? And care to
Pretty
comment
good. How
on?
about you two? Good to talk to you again,
Good,
brother.
man.
Good, good.
Good. Is it that way for you in Chicago? Do you notice
Yes, it is actually absolutely the same. We sometimes we spend some weekends outside doing some yard work, and I look up and we see all these lines everywhere, and it's just a little scary. I take as many pictures as I can, and it's just sometimes there was five or six at one time that they're just
right?
going overhead, and you just wonder
Right.
why. And obviously we know why, but it just makes anyone wonder why if you see it so much, right? And it's
Right.
everywhere.
Yeah, people should wonder, but um, a lot of people just they don't pay any attention or they think that it's a normal occurrence. They don't second guess anything, and but certainly this is not a natural phenomenon. So, but anyways, yeah, I think it has to do with some kind of sinister agenda that hasn't been, um, as far as disclosure or anything of that nature. It's not something that is known about, spoken about, or covered, or even brought up by representatives. Nobody knows who's funding and why, and who is supplying and also billing, paying for this whole scenario. It's crazy. But anyways, you guys are both doing well, enjoying the coming of spring.
Yes, yes, for sure. It's always beautiful here, but yeah, and to comment on what you were saying earlier, Zen, about the funding, I've actually traced it back to the Royal Society, which totally makes
Yeah,
sense. And and we know who presided over the Royal Society is Prince William. So
Oh,
just kind
yeah,
of to put some connections together there, and they have unlimited funding, so that would totally make sense.
right. I would love for you to elaborate sometime about that. Maybe we'll do a show sometime. I'll ask Matt Landman to join us. He's the individual that did the documentary on all of this as well, and so he's
Right, right.
quite knowledgeable on this. But yeah, that would be. I'd love to track down, as far as who follow the money, because that always takes you to the culprit and also the reason. So yeah, that would be an interesting show. But
now,
go ahead, Brett.
do you think this is a lot prevalent in Europe as well because of that?
Yeah, I think it's everywhere. I mean,
Everywhere?
maybe I don't know about really small areas of the world, like smaller islands or something, but in all the large metropolitan areas, this seems to be, a normal part of the agenda that they spray before the storms come, and whatever they are putting up into the air, that the rain brings it down. People get sick and breathe it in, and of course we know from the Georgia Guidestones that their focus was to narrow and depopulate the world. And as crazy as all that sounds, I mean, that's from their own, the Ten Commandments of the Georgia Guidestones, basically, to reduce the population to a manageable size,
Right.
from 7 billion to 500 million. I mean, that's quite a reduction.
Yeah,
Right.
and I can attest to that because, Noble and I, we had what we would call a cruise ministry for the past 15 years or so, and we've traveled to like over 60 countries, and every single place you see it. I mean, regardless, even on like islands where there's not that much population, or but like Zen said, especially the big cities. Just
Yeah.
and even on tours that we've done, I've looked up in the sky and I'm looking out the tour bus window going, oh my gosh, they're spraying again. And around me will hear it and be like, what are you talking about? And when you point it out to people, kind of like things in the extra biblicals is what it reminds me of. You point it out to people and you explain the
Right.
agenda behind it. All of a sudden their eyes are open and it's like, what? But I
Wow.
mean, it's not normal to see white stripes in the sky. I mean, I
Right.
know that NASA's tried to label all these various clouds that they're creating themselves. But once you point it out to people, it's like a light goes on or something for most people anyway that I've talked to.
Lisa, I
Yeah.
got a
Yeah. I think
question.
it's easy to recognize once you see it. Go ahead, Brett.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Zen.
Oh, you're good, brother.
Is there anything, because I know for EMF, etc., is there anything that we can possibly take that you've done research on to possibly maybe counter any effects or anything like any type of supplement, pine
Uh,
needles, etc. type of thing? Have you heard
yeah,
of?
there's actually quite a bit out there. Personally, I like to drink soursop tea, which is also known as guiabana tea, with make it with these leaves, and it's a really good detoxer. But also, you kind of need like type of a binder to pull these heavy metals that we're breathing in out of our bloodstream. So I like to use like either activated charcoal, or chlorella is a good one,
Mm-hmm.
or spirulina. There's a bunch of stuff out there that works as really good binders just to bring the heavy metals out, because they can accumulate pretty fast in the system. And then of course to make sure that you are drinking um, purified water, alkaline water, something, not just the regular tap water anyway.
Okay, yeah. So
Right.
it's more of a metal cleanse, right? Because I think, Corella, like you said, oregano, right? That's another one I heard it was
Yes.
pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oregano
All right,
oil
guys.
Yeah, oregano oil is more of like a natural antibiotic. So if you have like some kind of a viral infection or something you're trying to get rid of, like I've been taking it for all these crazy wounds on my legs, which praise yeah, they're finally almost gone. So
Okay.
but yeah, there's a bunch of different natural things out there. You can even just do a search and look for binders or heavy metal binders, and there's a lot of different options. So I mean, God's always provided the right things for us to heal our own bodies, so we just have to look for it, I guess.
Like, yeah, like chelation too, right?
Yes,
Chelation,
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes,
very good.
exactly.
Yes. Well, hey, Brett, let's turn it over to you, Brett, and if you would share, the books topic that we're going to be covering this evening, and where people can go to find support your work, your website, and all of that, and what you've been up to of late.
Okay, the website is mysterybabylon.com, pretty simple. And the books are 3 out of the Mystery Babylon, the Rise of Mystery Babylon series. I'm working on and hopefully finishing my final one here coming up in a couple months. So I'm very excited and very worn out, but it's been a lot of work over the years. But the one we'll be talking about tonight is chapter 2, I believe, in the second volume called The Tower of Babel. And I hope you enjoy it, but we're going to get into a little bit more of history again, back into the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and the creation of Adam, pretty much. And what I hope to accomplish from these volumes is not just a parallel of those times of the past and today, but more of something we could take with us and to learn something about how things were done and maybe how things were originally set up with by God, and how we can apply them to our world today and how we can live. Because again, I believe if God sets up things, that He doesn't really want things to change. He wants us to follow and continue following these things. I think people's interpretation mixes things up and messes it up for us now. So I believe that in this parallel, we can actually see things that were done right and done proper, and then we can still use them and utilize them today. So that's part of what I try to do with these volumes, is to connect everything together, the past and to the present.
All right. Quick comment from the chat. Crazy Kathy um, says look up geoengineering.gov. So, yeah, we'll do that. Thank you, sister. Appreciate you. And appreciate everybody, and especially the moderators. Thanks always, Rick and Sherry and Tammy, and all those that support our show. We greatly appreciate all of you. And to all the new listeners, thank you for joining us and opening yourself up to new possibility. All right, brother, let's get it going. Let's get into the material and share some research.
Okay. As we got into the last few sessions we've talked about, we've done a little bit of my attempt to just put things together and maybe link these very ancient times of the Garden of Eden and what happened to a lot of the way paganism developed and formed, and some of the characters that actually started way back then are pretty much the same, in my opinion, as today. And as we see in mythologies of today, they're just renamed or rebooted. But I believe it, like a lot of it, comes down to the same characters way, way, way back in the garden. So as we start to understand that, or hopefully understand it, we just do see that it's a small world if we really think about it. I mean, we do have the rest of the world, which is a lot of it is pagan, and then we do have biblical stories and interpretations. And if we really point the picture and try to figure out, do they match? Are they two in the same? I believe that they are. I just believe that when we hear pagan accounts and mythologies, that they take it from an opposite point of view. Obviously, they don't believe that God is the God. They take it as their secular gods and multiple gods of this world, which I've mentioned before. I believe that they came from Eve, Cain, Abel, the serpent himself, and Adam. I believe that the pagan people of old, and especially Cain and the serpent, actually developed this religion. So we'll go into that a little bit. But I believe if we start to see things now, we don't really see that paganism and the opposition, as I can call it here, didn't just kind of come organically or just arrive, through hunter gatherers and etc. I believe that it's actually was something that was passed on with these same characters over many years. So, like I said, it's just another piece of the puzzle when we are looking for something that we do find, and we could put it together now and to see that we're not too far from actually understanding how the serpent did manage to help bring paganism around to the world about us. Make sense, guys? Or what do you think? Any comments?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been covering this for a while, so let's move on. Let's go.
Okay. When I get into the some of these early symbols and things that we see, because they didn't have much back then in the times of when, like in Babylon, etc. They didn't have computers, etc. So when they had to write down what they thought, if they put it on vases, if they put on murals, whatever they did, they had to have symbols. Obviously, we have symbols, but a lot of times, I think sometimes when they wanted to express emotion or say things, they'd have to do it in a certain way that we can understand, or they probably understood back then, because they couldn't, when they did a picture, they had to express it. Like, let's just say when we see a mural or a pictograph colored red, we'd start to assume that red might have something to do with heat, maybe emotion, something strong like that. We see a being with wings, okay, a god with wings or whatever back then. We don't know if these ancient entities actually flew, but we could assume that these wings were supposedly a way to symbolize that they had a way to go in and out of the supernatural, in and out of the spiritual world swiftly. They understood what went on above in the heavens, etc. So they linked, in my research here, they linked with these wings a lot of divine and heavenly information coming from these beings. So if you see some of them, again, that's why I believe wings were another symbol. So we have to, according to the research, we have to kind of like think about, okay, well, what could these things mean? And they do mean things after a while. Another thing that we'll see as we do some research and we look through here is, as I said, emotions. When we hear stories that, talk about the goddess Ishtar descending to the underworld, we could actually think about that, because we know if Ishtar and Eve were the same, and Tammuz, which I believe was Abel, was killed, she was very sad and she descended to the underworld. Did she really descend to that physical place, or did she felt like she was in hell in her mind, or was it something that emotional? I believe that there could be actually a way in some of these stories to describe that she went through a horrible state of emotion. We talk about the color black, okay, blackness. Could that actually mean an emotional state inside someone's heart, a blackened heart? It doesn't have to necessarily mean, something outside or a color, but could it be stand for one's this depression, despair, or something of the like, okay? These things, I believe, will come into play later on as we do talk about how we can actually read through the symbols and read through the stories and understand what may actually have gone on. Does that make any sense, or is that, you guys comment? Anything?
Yeah. I was going to make a quick comment about the blackened faces. There's a lot of symbology in the last part of the book of First Enoch, where it talks about the animal farm type of symbology, and the evil characters are always like the black bulls. Like that was representative of Cain in that reading. And I can't think of any other writings where that symbology is within the Bible, but definitely in the book of First Enoch. I don't know if you can think of any other ones then, but that's the first one that popped in my mind.
In Second Ezra, we have symbology as well. There's a series of dreams where the angels are telling Ezra to go and to fast for a certain period, and then they would bring interpretation. But yeah, there's a lot of ancient texts share metaphorically, symbolically, what happens and what's going to happen, and prophetically, even like with the statue, of gold and silver and um, brass and iron and clay, and how that signified four kingdoms that would rise and pass, and that would span over a period of 6,000 years or 120 jubilees. And that is also, we find, the scripture is always conveying symbolically what would happen. Even the dream that Joseph interpreted for Pharaoh of the seven fat kine and the seven lean, and how that would represent famine, and suffering, and Joseph preparing the granaries and stocking up over the 7 years of plenty. He saved the world, even his own brothers, and made Pharaoh uh, mightily wealthy and rich and powerful, and Egypt became the dominant empire of that day.
Very good. Yeah, I like that story too. Yeah, I think that the catapult off what you said, Lisa, here about First Enoch. I don't know if I've read it before, but I have a verse in actually the third Enoch, and it says, "The color of the wicked was like the bottom of a pot on account of the wickedness of their doings." So it's interesting because it actually links the color dark, but the bottom
Yeah.
of a pot, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Now, again, the reason why I kind of get into some of these symbols is because we don't have much. Again, we have the ancient texts. We have some things we can see if we dig up things, whatever. We don't have a ton to put the whole story together of the Garden of Eden and Adam, etc. We do have the Bible, but any little bit helps. So that's why I try to link everything I can, and even look and see if I can see through some of these symbols that could actually mean something. Like, one of the perfect ones we see is, you think of the devil, and you see him with pitchforks, and you see him with a tail, and you see him with the horns, and you see him being red. There you go. We have that color red, because I think a lot of those, that whole picturesque scene of him is symbols of so many different things that was coming out from something in the past, but it's all collected together. But I think when we do see that, we start to get an idea of these characters, of these stories back then, and what they might have actually been about, and what might have happened. Because again, there's one story that actually happened, but we're trying our best to piece it together the best we can. So that's why I think these things are important. Another thing I've been using, at least in this part of the volume, is Islamic texts and historians, and they've helped to they seem to capitalize a lot on these colors, and a lot on the early times of Adam, especially with the serpent, and how that whole thing went down before he was created. They do talk quite a bit about that. And one text basically said, "Then God sent him, Adam, down to earth with blackened face." So again, I don't think it necessarily meant that in this case, because they talked a lot about how Adam would think, and how Adam would know to understand that darkness could invade his heart and mind temporarily, and understand that he could have ups and downs in this life. So again, I believe that these are all important, and it may not be totally important now, but as we continue on and understand these stories, as we get deeper into them, they'll be helping us to put the pieces back into our puzzle.
Hey, I wanted to bring up really quickly before I forget two things that were very intriguing that I wanted to share with both of you, and also with the listening audience, and that had to do with the use of AI and the the digital archives that many places, monasteries, and a lot of very ancient languages that have never been uh, deciphered, that they are using AI to look and find patterns, and repeating patterns, and predictive patterning, to determine, what some of the symbols and some of these pictographic languages, what they actually mean and are saying. And so there is coming a huge mass wealth of information from every culture worldwide that, there's many, many ancient languages. And this is also, the AI is also confirming that there was a culture, which, we've been covering this for a long time because it's part of the Thracian Chronicles and the Thracian epistles, but that this ancient language is connected and predates the ancient hieroglyphic system. And they are now discovering that, this Thracian writing is the most ancient in the world, and that where they thought it only was pictographic and had no meaning nor any kind of lexicon or language context to these symbols, AI is actually affirming that there is deep meaning and complex, language patterns to these symbols. And so it's very exciting because it's bringing out a lot of what was the most ancient writings that have been lost um, to public consideration. And so that's all very exciting. And then the other aspect of that is that they are starting to digitize all of the scrolls and texts in places like St. Catherine's Monastery, which has been around since the second century AD, and has thousands of ancient manuscripts that were part of what was available during the early ecclesia and during the time when Christ walked on the earth. And so that's going to be, fascinating material to consider as well. But just wanted to bring that up. Would you both care to comment, Lisa? We'll go to you and then Brett.
Yeah, at first when you hear AI, you're like, oh no, it's the beast system. We can't be a part of that. But just like we are using the internet right now, just like we're using part of the beast system for the glory of Yah, there's some good things that can come out of it. And we have some friends that have been experimenting with the Chat GPT. And I actually went in there and tried it. Just you can ask certain questions or you can ask things about history. And it's confirmed a lot of the research that's already done by like truth-based channels here on YouTube and ministries, such as like the ancient buildings that they're not, just only 200 years old. They're much older than that, and probably built by the Canaanites since they were the city builders, right? And then lately, I thought it was hilarious. I asked Chat GPT, did Katy Perry really travel to space? And it said no. So I think it's hilarious. It has to tell the truth. And so, I could probably ask about the moon landings. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's going to be coming out because of their own beast system. So I think that that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it is. And it's going to be cool. But yeah, it's a tool, so go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I'm a little more pessimistic about that. I'm very, let's say, cautiously optimistic. Because when again somebody has to program AI and tell it what to say and what not to say at the very heart, So that's why I'm always kind of a little bit skeptical. But I'm sure it has a lot in there. But I just tend to be that way because I just believe, as you were saying, Lisa and Zen, that the beast system. We just have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and just kind of understand that there is an agenda with AI. There's got to be when it gets fully in place. My
Right.
guess.
Right.
Well, yeah, I
Zen,
certainly think that
go ahead.
eventually it will evolve to something that can be dangerous for humanity, certainly if it, um, takes on sentience,
Yeah.
which I think that it's inevitable that it will do that because it's, these computer systems and these robots are going to have all of the information available on the web and hopefully not the dark web, but taking all that information and understanding it all and being able to process it into what would be computer thought. I mean, that can definitely be a very overpowering situation, and if it ever decided, and which people have already asked AI robots about their protective capacity of taking care of humans, and though they say that they could never harm humans, certainly the programming is being put into place that they are creating AI robots to fight in war, and to use these robots to enter into and as far as the combat zone and to take on the enemy and
Mhm.
kill and slaughter. And they have pinpoint precision with laser and bombs and missiles and all that. I mean, they could definitely be a very dangerous adversary.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we've seen this in predictive programming. Can't speak here. We've seen this in predictive programming in movies, and all different types of ways that how that they can actually turn on humans. And I totally believe that's possible. But we also know there's nothing new under the sun. So I'm thinking
Right.
too, like in Lord of the Rings, it showed that they were creating these like beings to orcs, to do their battles that were not, of course, human. And I'm sure that that's part of the plan for the future with the military worldwide.
Mhm.
Yes. Unfortunately, but yes.
Yeah, well, we think about, when you did a simple web search years ago, it would pull up whatever. You know what I mean? You can just do a search and it would just kind of pull up whatever and it would be kind of more free. But you've noticed,
Right.
I'm sure, in the last few years, you pull up a web search on certain topics and the one you're searching for is buried way, way, way in the third, fourth page, and all of these other ones that are just continually thrown up there by the same sources. So that's where I'm starting to question. I'm starting to think, okay, these algorithms, what is going on? Why? Of course, it's kind of against seeking and trying to find, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's even if it comes up anymore,
Yeah.
because they have suppressed the truth so profoundly now that it's only propaganda that comes up on a screen and with a search. And like even the shows that I do here on YouTube, even if you look for it explicitly with every the words of even the titles and names of the shows, sometimes it just will not bring them up,
Hmm.
and they remain suppressed. So, but it is what it is.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So then again, what I try to do in these readings and our time together is just try to understand what the whole mysteries of Babylon are. Okay, so again, this is going to be digging more into the past so we can maybe get something out of it today and see what we might be missing, obviously, and what they're trying to either hide or not let us see. So we continue on with the early part of the Garden of Eden, just before Adam's creation, because just to give us some thoughts and something to go home with. Now, a lot of people might not totally agree, but my research has found that I believe personally that there may be two major enemies of mankind. I've always kind of subtly talked about this: Samael and then the serpent himself. Um, Samael being that the cherub, the top cherub of God, the spiritual being, the one in the heavenly realm, may have even been out of the same splendor or close splendor of God, considered the firstborn, whatever. Whatever. There's different thoughts about him, but and then we have, which I believe again was the serpent himself, actually more of a seraph, a seraphim, a doctor type, and a little bit different, but both ending up on the same avenue of rejection because of the way they thought about Adam. Your comments on that before I get into it more?
Um, I'll just let's just get into it.
Okay. Okay.
Lisa,
Because
did
I
you
know it
want to
doesn't.
comment or something?
No, I just think it's really interesting that if I am I correct where you're separating the serpent and Samael as two separate entities, right? Is that
I am.
okay?
Yeah. It
Let's
just
hear
it
more about
just
that.
okay. Because there is and one interesting thing there is, and I'm not quite sure if it's Legends of the Jews, but there is a story that talks about Samael himself being only a spiritual being and cannot inflict or any actual harm on a human in this terrestrial realm. That's why he had to actually speak through the serpent, and so
Right.
he could be invited into the garden to speak to Eve. You guys have heard of that story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why I think that there could possibly be two major enemies of the mankind, one that was terrestrial and one that's strictly spiritual, which is the Samael. Um, so as I've going on with these and trying to wait just a second here. Oh, when I was talking about the Samael himself, we're going to get him into this first explanation. Later on in years, he became known as the accuser of the brethren, Satan, etc. Basically, and he just stuck in the spiritual realm. I believe that his original his original name was the severity of God, the original meaning for Samael, the severity of God, and known for his harshness, brutality, rigorousness. And he was basically also thought as the angel of death. So in my view, and according to the research, he as a cherub, as a military angel, he would do some of the dirty deeds, and if God commanded him to do that. So later, as he was speaking out against Adam and etc., his meaning changed. The meaning of the name Samael changed into the poison of God, and I believe that's because he was the one primarily responsible for poisoning the minds and souls of so many people after the fall. So that would be my take on Samael himself, the spiritual being. When we talk about this, the serpent himself, again, we do have we have titles for him, Azazel, and Nahash, etc. But I believe, again, when we think about serpents in an angelic realm, we can think seraphs, okay? We can think seraphim, physician or doctorate class, very, very smart, very wise, because you have in Matthew 10:16, we have be ye therefore wise as serpents. So we have both of them, and I believe, and again, they had to do some kind of collaboration because when it came down to it, they will both let their pride get the better of them. Comments?
Right. I agree.
Okay. So again, I'm setting the stage here because it's a long book, so it's a lot to understand. But we're just kind of going here month to month or month whatever. So there's a lot, but I just want to try to go through this book and kind of show what the research has found here to maybe show what some of the stories that might have kind of gone on behind the scenes of the early Garden of Eden. Some of the research I found where it says there could have been about 50 Nephilim angels that were to be terrestrial in the Garden of Eden, which actually could manifest themselves as human beings, but they were classified as these seraphs or serpents to be working under Adam. And I believe that the Nephilim were actually not the giants per se, but they were actually these angels, because that Nephilim means the fallen ones, and I believe that they have fallen from their first estate or their better estate because of how their pride got and how they started thinking negatively towards Adam and his creation and his role. So I believe there's a little bit of difference. A lot of people do, or people might translate them, believe the Nephilim were the giants themselves. That's fine, whatever. That's fine. That's fine with me. But like I said, I believe that the giants may have other names like the Anakim or Anakim, those of the necklace, etc. But I don't know if they're necessarily the same as the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't think the giants are the Anunnaki. I think the fallen angels are the Anunnaki.
I agree. I do too. I agree. I agree that the Anunnaki were exactly that. Do Do you believe that they were the then the serpents, then all like the 50 or so angels or whatever what I'm talking about here, the Nephilim?
Yeah, I think that they were the seraphic angels that rebelled against the Most High and that were cast out with Samael in the war in heaven in the first world age.
Absolutely, I believe that too, and you could also call the Anunnaki the jinn in Islamic sources. So I believe
Yeah.
that. I'd be curious. I mean, Zen, if you wanted to just give the war in heaven, I like I said, I didn't do a ton of research on that part of it, but is that your interpretation of when was God going to create Adam at that time, or was that just where Samael got a little bit too much pride, or what kind of sparked that part of it? If you can give me a thought
The
on that.
war in heaven had nothing to do with Adam. It had to do with Christ being introduced as the light of the world. And that's when he was given dominion over the angels, that's when iniquity was found within Samael. And that's when he tempted all of the angels to join him in rebelling against the Most High and seizing the throne, where he said he wanted to exalt his throne above the stars and the clouds of God and to be like the Most High. That's when he made that attempt. And, of course, where it says uh, that God said, light be, this is when Christ was actually given dominion and introduced to the angels as they recognize, it says in the text, that they recognize the voice as their father, and that the light, the the spirit hovering over the darkness as the mother, the ruach, and then the light that came forth as Christ. And so it represented the Elohim, the Holy Trinity, the Godhead, and they rebelled against, and this was during the first day before the creation of Adam on the sixth day. And so, um, of course, I talk about and I cover in my great contest one, the war in heaven, how it was that even Adam and all of us, we all pre-existed. We were part of the angels that were created on, and the spirits of all the elements that were created on the first day. But then the angels, the rebel angels, the insurgent angels, they rebelled against the Most High and they were cast out. There's a passage in the first book of Adam and Eve, chapter 55, that talks about, and there is a review. The angels are telling Adam as to what had happened before his creation and before Satan, wanted to take revenge against him. And they explained why it was that Satan, the adversary of man and El, hated Adam and Eve so much because Adam didn't understand, why this angel hated him so deeply and wanted to trick him and cause his downfall and deceive him to fall. And it was because he wanted to rule over Adam and he wanted to take Eve as his wife. But all of this was not in the cards. And so that's how humanity, on the sixth day, the temptation of Adam and Eve, the whole theme of their being deceived, her being beguiled, that is what led to us being here. But there's a whole world age, and it says that they were here for 10 shars, which is 432,000 years. And so, in my opinion, and the Sumerian Kings list and the other Kings list showed that same duration of time that they were here on the earth before we were, and they were here for a very long period of time. And then when Adam and Eve fell and were tempted and placed on the earth here, that was for the last 6,000 years. And so there's a huge amount of time and a great, as far as, what had happened in the previous world age with um, with the dragons, the dragon lords ruling over the world. That was when they were here before we were, and they were the ones that constructed all of the megalithic structures and all of the cyclopean um, temples and ziggurats that are found all over the world, especially those that are in the bottoms of the oceans, because all of that was constructed in a very ancient time before the ocean levels changed during the global ice age.
Right. And there's also too, I mean, a lot of evidence of multiple incursions, like what you just described, Zen, like happening before the creation of Adam. And then, um, and there is some debate as to if the word Nephilim, because it comes from the root Nephal, which means to fall, basically, and then so the Nephilim would be the plural, the fallen ones. So, Bible scholars have seen numerous debates on how that could be the name for the fallen angels because they were actually the ones that fell, or if it would be for their offspring. But we know that the name kind of changes after the flood, and so they're known as the Rephaim in the Bible anyway after the flood. Also the Anak, all the different tribes of giants have their own various names in the land of Canaan. And we know too that not all of the angels that incursion that occurred on Mount Hermon, they're not, those angels were placed in the pit prison, which is where they're going to be residing until judgment. But that wasn't all of the angels because there's been so many different multiple incursions. And we see in the book of Jude how some of them are what we call planets today, which we know are not what science calls planets. They're actually angels, right? And then we know that after Babel, that in Psalm 82, that they were placed over different principalities over earth. And that leads back to that whole divine council concept, and how the Most High still has control and still has rulership over them. But because that's why we say we live in a fallen world. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for clearing that up, Zen. That was and that makes sense, total sense. I got one question for you real quick, though. When you said 432,000 and they were in the world before, what are you are you talking about the Nephilim themselves before they were fallen, or when you said what is
No,
that?
after they were fallen, when they were banished out of the heavens. This occurred on
Mhm.
the first day before the firmament was put into place. When
Gotcha.
light and darkness were separated, that is when the war in heaven occurred. That's when Legion became the forces of darkness, and that's when Samael and his group were banished from the upper heavens and not allowed to enter into the presence of the Most High any longer. And so that's when they also were given temporary reign over this fallen world. Um, and this is why now the earth is the meeting, the conjoining place for both spirit and matter. And it's here that um, even we, because we are angels as well before our physical mortal incarnation, in the same way that, Jeremiah was told that he was known before he ever entered into the womb of his mother, that he had been foreordained as a prophet unto the nations, that all of us were known by the Most High before the foundations of the worlds were ever even settled and created. And so there's an entire world age prior to what we find ourselves living in, and that is also referenced in First Peter chapter 2. And so, but that's a part of history that most people don't know about, and there's not a lot of material written about the antediluvian age, the prior times of what in the Sumerian mythos and the writings of Zechariah Sitchin, the story of the Anunnaki, they tell their own story, and they talk about how they were they arrived here, that 432,000 years ago, which is 10 shars, and each shard is 3,600 years in length, and that according to the Sumerian kings list, that these kings reigned for a very long time initially. And it only makes sense if you realize that these kings that are listed on the Sumerian kings list, they were not human, but they were angelic. They were the seraphim angels, the feathered serpent that we see that in the antediluvian age, there was the worship of the feathered serpent, Viracocha Kukulkan, all of which means the plumed serpent. And even, America takes its name from the worship of the plumed serpent as well.
Right.
And so, again, science and modern study and scholars, they try to teach evolution and that we all evolved of apes, but that's totally not true. The fallen angels were here way before we were, and there were also giants, ancient giants that were magnificent in size, much larger than the giants post-flood, after the Most High resettled everything uh, with Noah and his children. And so, and we see the remnants of that age, in the landscape, that there are ancient giants as well as ancient creatures that are solidified. They are petrified and they remain. Their bodies are fossilized in the landscape. And these kind of creatures and beings, trolls, dwarves, giants, hobbits, all of that can be found all over the world, as well as the very ancient creatures that existed in that prior time. So people just have to consider that age in order to understand the fullness of the history of, as well, the fallen angels and how their history is a part of our own, but it preceded ours.
Very interesting. Go ahead. Go ahead,
No, I
Lucia,
say
you said
that's so helpful to know, Zen. There's a couple questions in the chat, just so you know, guys. We'll get to the after the break. We have a break in about a minute, but Brett, go ahead.
Okay, very quickly. Yeah, I have some of that actually. What you're talking about, I totally am on that plane field. What you're talking about, the age before our own. I believe that there is something like that definitely may have went on. We're not really privy to it, at least that much, but there is some sources that can help, like you've researched there, Zen. So yeah, after the break, I'd like to talk with you a little bit and throw you a few more things that way, but we can maybe talk about them because it's interesting. That I believe that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Me too.
absolutely. Love to.
Previous age.
Yeah. I think it's a very important study for people to consider, because it does bring to truth everything that is now, currently veiled and
Yeah.
little understood. All right, we'll be right back, everyone.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Take it further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
Become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
When Justin and I found out we were having a little girl, we named her Eliana and started dreaming of what life would be like with her, where we would take her, what we would teach her, and of course, what we would read to her. One day we walked around a bookstore looking for books we might want for her and found nothing. So we started brainstorming what exactly we would want. Even from a young age, we wanted her to know and understand the heart of God and hidden truths that are in ancient biblical manuscripts like the Book of Enoch, and the idea of the Prophecy for Children series was born. Justin got hard to work and praise Yah released the Prophecy for Children series. We are grateful for the support and amazing feedback from others who have been wanting the same for their children. With our newest addition to the family, Ezra, we also added Enoch's Judgment of the Giants to this prophecy series. We're excited to keep writing books for our children to share with our truth-seeking family. To order these books today, please check out sacredwordpublishing.com/collections/children.
Thank everybody for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the one place where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio. All right, let's show them what we got here. All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for a second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and I'm joined by our co-host, Lisa George, and also our very good friend, author, Brett Thomas. Brett, I want to turn it back over to you, brother. I think you were going someplace right before the break.
Yeah. You know, some interesting things to kind of bounce off what you were saying, Zen, about it. And the research that I've come up with is that when the garden was actually put back into place, there's been talk about maybe the garden even being having to be watched or guarded. You know, some of these texts say that, you know, God tells Eve to guard and watch out for the garden and make sure it's okay. And I've heard even sometimes they talked about a wall being around the garden. And I just wondered, you know, I thought about it, okay, if it was such a perfect place, because I honestly really don't think that the world was created perfectly at this time. I think, again, with the gap theory being reorganized and reconstituted into something else, I don't think it was perfect, because I believe that the potential for sin and for downfall was still there. That's because why would anybody like Eve have to guard the garden or make sure it was okay? Because as you're bouncing off a little bit, what you were saying, Zen, is maybe that, you know, if our world was brought up from the ashes of a previous world, that there might have been a lot of negativity that went on in this previous world. So it's, all things weren't perfect. The Bible never says that what is creation is recreation, was perfect. He said it was very, very good, or very good. Right?
Yeah. Initially, though, when it was first established, in Isaiah 45:18, it says that, and in Second Ezra, that it was a perfect work and that was made to be inhabited. But when the rebel angels decided to wage war against the Most High and the Father, the Son, the Ruach, they were cast down and cast here to this earth. That's where we see in Psalms 82 that they were then placed under the authority of death. And that's why Samael became the angel of death, because that's when death came into being. And rather than Adam and Eve being the first victims of that sentence, it was actually the angels that were placed under that authority. That the third of the angels that rebelled, the insurgent angels, they would lose their eternity, and a sentence would be pronounced on them that they would die, they would be annihilated after these 7,000 years of what would be the Second World Age. That even, when Christ came initially into the flesh, they recognized him as their tormentor. They said, "Have you come to, to torture us before the time?" So there is a time when they will be destroyed in the second death, and that's the sentence that was pronounced upon them. They were the first ones to be placed under the authority of death, and they transformed from being ethereal to taking on substance. Being in this world, they took on corporeal, physical, um, substantial bodies, and then they now take and need to occupy and possess flesh bodies in order to interact and engage with this physical world. And so, even in Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, it says that Satan will die the death of a man at the end of the age, that Christ would burn him from the inside out just by speaking a word, that he would burst into flames and that he would die that way. But all of that was, again, previous to the fall of Adam and Eve. And even with Adam and Eve, just to cover this really quickly, when it was their bodies, their flesh bodies, what were their immortal bodies, their bright nature, all of that was created on the sixth day. But their spirits, Adam, it was his spirit, the ruach, the wind, the breath that was blown into that body that was created for him. But he, like all of us, pre-existed before being merged and entering into that bright-natured, immortal embodiment. And he was, of course, tasked with work in the garden, but he was placed into what is New Jerusalem, in my opinion, the paradise, which paradise is not here on the earth. Even in Revelation 2, it says that the tree of life is within the paradise of God, and that is above the firmament. That's where all the patriarchs and matriarchs, the righteous, live and currently dwell. That is New Jerusalem that will descend out of the heavens after Christ comes and judges the world and brings forth, the wrath upon the wicked, those not written into the books of life. And at that time, there will be a new heaven and a new earth. And as I show in my work, that destruction occurs before the millennial age and it restores everything to a harmonious, serene state. And then, of course, after that, we enter into, God willing, that we are numbered with the elect and we enter into New Jerusalem for the Sabbath day of rest that lasts 1,000 years. That's at the end of that time, Satan will be loose for that little season. And then judgment, the great white throne judgment, and those that align with evil, the kings of the world, the blood royals, they will be thrown into the lake of fire, along with death and Satan and all the fallen ones that no longer have immortal status. Because, they being placed under the authority of death, they will die the second death. They will be annihilated and cease to exist. Comment?
One thing, Lisa, you got a comment? Or?
I just wanted to go before I forget. Sherry Papin asked you a question earlier, and that was excellent, by the way, Zen. Everyone in the chat is just in awe. We love this conversation between the two of you. I didn't want to jump in and ruin it, but Sherry was asking you a question, Brett, about the Nephilim. She put two different spellings, and I can answer this, but I want to hear it from you. She's asking, would the Nephilim, Naphalem, be different than the Nephilim, with the I am at the end? Maybe that's the distinction from the angels that would have been in the garden from what you're describing?
The ones that I hear the most about, and Zen would probably know more about the pre-Adamic world, but the ones that I hear most about would be the Nephilim, so the Nephilim. Not quite sure. Would you know about the other one?
I think that the differences in spelling in English, in Hebrew, it's the same. It's just because there's no vowels in Hebrew. And so it's kind of whatever the translator decides to insert into there. And so to me, it's the same word with just a slight variation in spelling.
That's what I've heard too. I've heard pretty much close to the same, but I didn't really know if that other one might have some kind of different meaning, but I assumed that they were the same.
Yeah. And then also, well, go ahead. Go ahead, Zen.
Lisa. Go ahead, Zen. I'll comment.
No. You go, Zen. I was going to go on a different tangent.
I was just going to say really quickly that I do believe that there is a difference. And the difference is that the first world age, the rebel angels, the 1/3 of the angels that joined Samael, Satan, Lucifer, Hallel, in his rebellion against the Most High. We see this in the second book of Enoch in chapter 29. It says that one from amongst the angels, he rebelled with the order beneath him, and that he desired to establish his throne above the stars and the clouds of God and to be like the Most High. We know that's the same thing as it says in Isaiah 14 about Hallel, the son of the morning, who is Lucifer, Samael, Satan. And so this 1/3 of the angels are legion, and they were banished on the first day, and they were imprisoned here to the earth when the firmament was put into place. And they have been here on the earth since the second day. And so from the second to the sixth day, they existed here on the earth, and that span, according to the Sumerian text, is 432,000 years. The word Nephal, of course, is the fallen ones, and I believe it is a connection to the Anunnaki, which the Anunnaki in the Sumerian means those who from the heavens to the earth came. And it's the same thing. They are the dragon, seraphic angels that were cast out of the heavens, banished here to the earth before the destruction of the first world age. Mm-hmm. And then we have on the sixth day, of course, the creation of Adam and Eve, Adam first and Eve being taken from him, from his rib, created into an entire new being, a wombed man, which is a woman who can carry a child and procreate the race. And when they lost their immortal bright nature, they were then banished here to the earth where the fallen ones, the Anunnaki, were already present. And they were already in the process of trying to enslave the pre Adamites that were here in the earth at that time. And so the modern age, the second world age, is the 6,000 years of the banishment of Adam and Eve to this world. And of course, the second incursion, the Nephilim, in my opinion, as most people um, are familiar, are the ones that are mentioned in the book of Enoch. They are the watchers that left their heavenly place, their first estate, their place of habitation. And that was after the first rebellion of the one third of the angels that joined Lucifer in his rebellion, Legion. They were already banished here to the earth. They were already in place on the earth before the Watchers rebelled. And so you see there's two incursions. The Nephal, of course, that's a reference to the one third of the angels of the Most High that rebelled against him. And then you have in the book of Enoch the mention of the Nephilim, which are the 200 angels that rebelled during the time of Enoch's father, Yared. His name meaning descent. That's when the Watchers challenged um, Christ to put them into mortal embodiment. And they came down here to the earth. They were supposed to teach humanity about where we had fallen from and about how to return to that place, that we are not from this world, but that we are temporarily living, processing the whole, the duality of good and evil being in this flesh mortal embodiment, but that our spirits are the breath of life that is engaged with us. And that's the aspect of us that pre existed before this world and before our mortal embodiment. And so, very important to understand that there were two incursions, that there were two sets of angels which rebelled against the Most High, and that the stories of their fall are different and individual. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they're very good details. And Sherry
Mm-hmm.
had a quick question for you. So when you're talking about one third of the angels that fell, would that be called Legion? Because in my opinion, the
Yes.
Legion is more a reference to demons that were cast up by the Messiah.
Well, yeah, they are demons as well. They are fallen angels. In their original, they are the seraphim angels, but of course, they are also legion. They are the because we in the same way that after the Watchers came here and they created the race of giants, this same thing happened with the fallen angels, the one third of the angels that rebelled, and the pre-Adamites. They also engaged in carnality with them, and they created an unnatural hybrid race. So, what the Watchers did was just a repeat of what had happened in the previous world age. And we can get, let me actually pull it up for
Yeah,
we
this is
get
so
more detail
interesting.
on this in Genesis 6. Let me read it and then we'll talk about it. Because
Yeah,
in this particular passage, it tells us about the sons of God mating with the daughters of man, that this was before the fall of the Watchers, that it was an occurrence that happened before even Adam and Eve were here. And so let's look at this closely. It says, And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. The time that men began to multiply on the face of the earth was when the pre-Adamites were created in Genesis 1:26 through 28. It was then that men were told, and men meaning not Adam and Eve, but the pre-Adamites that were created, the hominids that were created in couples, as couples, male and female created they them. And they scattered them as different races and different peoples all throughout the earth. And these were the beings that were told to go forth, multiply, and to fill the face of the earth. And so here, where it says, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. This is an allusion to the fallen ones engaging in carnality with the pre-Adamites. And then also, of course, we have the episode of the 200 watchers repeating the same, except they were engaging in carnality with not the pre-Adamites, but the daughters of Cain, as it says in the Kever Nagas, chapter 100, on the fall of the angels. And so, nothing new under the sun. Everything is a repeat. And so.
Wow. That was great. Everyone in chat is just like so appreciative of both of you and all your information. I'd want to encourage everyone to go into sacredwordpublishing.com to the bookstore. Brett's books are available there. Zen's got books on all of these topics, everything that they're describing. And so if you want to really dive into detail, please go and check out their books. And also, they can reach you as well, Brett. I mean, just like Zen, through email, right? Brett, your email is available to anyone for questions.
Yeah, anybody, anytime. Mystery Babylon, all one word, at 1791.com. So that's it. Mystery Babylon at 1791.com. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, great. That would be perfect.
Yeah, I like that, Zen. I like it a lot. Just put it in here real quick. Okay, there we go. I've always been a little skeptical. Are you done? I didn't mean to interrupt anyone. If anyone's still talking.
Nope, go for it, Brett.
Okay. I've always been a little skeptical of like the King's List or any type of Babylonian interpretation, with Sitchin and etc. But Zen, now that you talk about it actually being a pre-Adamite time, that makes a lot more sense, because again, I would always be, again, I always have to wonder what direction are they trying to push us towards, especially if it's Babylonian, it's pagan, but that does make some sense that could be a pre-Adamite era. That makes total sense, that the age before our own. And just to throw something a little at you, Zen, what you're, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it, is one of the sources that I've read or researched, that basically they talked about this first world age, is that when everything was destroyed and when we had to reconstitute into this age, a lot of the souls of the undecided were meant to come back up. Like you said, kind of Adam was already pre-existent in that time, but now in this age, he had to come back, just like all of us have to come back and to make that decision whether to follow God or not. Did you ever hear about that, or does that kind of jive with you, Zen?
Yeah, I actually cover that and talk about that in one of my books called Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny, because it's important to understand. And recently somebody asked me about this particular topic, because in the scriptures, in the Bible, it says, that it was because of Adam and Eve that we all came under the authority of death. And yes, that is true. It was the temptation, the beguilement of Eve and her being impregnated with Cain, and there being enmity between the bloodlines, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, that would all take place. That was all prophecy. The Most High, Yahuwah, was telling Adam and Eve that because they ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that this is what would happen to them, in that Eve would bear children in sorrow, and Adam would have to work the soil to bring forth sustenance to feed his progeny. But all of us also have part to play in our incarnation into this world. That has to do with election and predestination and pre-existence. And that book Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny, I cover this in great detail because understanding pre-existence and election, it shows to you how it is and why it is that Esau was hated and Jacob favored when neither of them had yet even been born as babies or as children to either incur the favor or the wrath of the Most High God. There has to be something that is connected to something that happened that we don't understand that determines election. And as I explain it in that particular book, it is the war in heaven which divided all of the angels into three sets: the good, the evil, and those that sat on the fence.
Undecided.
Those that
right.
didn't want to make the choice to join either side in fighting the war in heaven. And it's my opinion that this people, this huge gathering population of what were the angels of that time, of the first world age, because of the indecision, it is now why we find ourselves embodied in flesh form, that we are being given renewed chance, second opportunity to determine which master we are to serve. We are either going to side with Yahuwah, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, or with Satan and Legion. You can't serve two masters. And the thing about being lackadaisical in the first world age, whereas being a fence sitter during that time leads to incarnation and to our chance to realign our allegiance to the Most High in this lifetime, in this embodiment. We cannot be fence sitters in this lifetime, in this mortal embodiment, because Christ said of the Laodicean church that they would be spewed out and they would be counted with the wicked. So in this lifetime, we have to make the choice, the free will choice, to align ourselves with the Most High and to the payment that was paid by the Messiah on the cross in dying for all of us to bring everybody a clean state, to bring us back to our what would be tabula rasa, or to be where we can have salvation through Christ. That eternity, as long as we know, confess, and repent that Christ is King and Lord, Savior and Messiah. That's the determination that, salvation is extended to all of us gracefully by the Most High God. We just have to understand, know, and believe what He did for us in order to rectify the fall. Because the whole reason He came into mortal embodiment was to restore us to our glorified form. Because we are currently in a fallen state of being. It's without a doubt that we are under the authority of death. Our bodies are going to age and die unless Christ comes, which I do believe that we are the fig tree generation. And that being that generation, we will see the second advent of the Messiah. And at that time, those who are alive at that time will be caught up into the clouds to be with Him. In a twinkling of an eye, we will be restored to our glorified form. And we will then watch the wrath of God, the great and terrible day of the Most High, poured out on the wicked and those that are not written into the books of life, the kings and the royals that serve under the Illuminati elite. They will be here when punishment is pronounced against them. And the punishment will be so great that there will be a new heaven and a new earth before Christ comes down and puts his foot upon the earth. And then New Jerusalem descending out of the heavens that will set and fulfill the three fall feasts that remain to be fulfilled. That on the Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpet, that will be when the seventh trumpet is sounded. And then Christ will come to take judgment on the world. And that will be during the Day of Atonement. He will fulfill that feast, and judgment will be poured out on the wicked at that time. And then we will have the harvest. The harvest meaning the separation of the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep. And those that are numbered with the elect will then be allowed to enter into the Sabbath rest for the millennial age. And then afterwards, of course, Satan is loose for a little season. And then we have the second death, where Satan, death, the Illuminati, the kings and queens that serve under them, the New World Order, the globalists, all of them will be destroyed in the second death.
Gog and Magog. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Very good. Very good,
right.
Zen. Good explanation. I wanted just to say though, for anybody, are you done, Zen, or you just still got more?
Oh no, I'm good. Go right ahead.
Sure.
Brother.
You sure? I'm sorry.
I don't want to dominate because I know that we're trying to highlight your work in this show, but I will answer questions if.
Well, that's an important all that important information that you supplied though, so it's kind of necessary. So I appreciate it. But I wanted to kind of just to let some people know, and whoever might be listening or on the chat, is that this is not reincarnation. That's a twist. When they twist it around, the opponents or the enemies twist that around to make it, twist it around to something that you can achieve this on your own and without the Messiah, and something, if you can keep being dying and reborn again. So, right, this is nothing that has to do with reincarnation. This is just a one-time shot that we have in this second age. That's important.
Even though, yes, we pre-existed before taking on mortal embodiment, we don't cycle through life in multiple lifetimes, and like they teach as far as people reincarnating into the world over and over and over, that negates judgment. And we know in Hebrew chapter 9, verse 23, that it says we live one lifetime and then judgment. And there's another story too, also in the Gospel of Nicodemus. You see that when Christ told Adam that after a certain period of time he would be born of his bloodline, he would die on the cross, then he would descend down into Sheol to free them from their bondage in what was Abraham's bosom. And he would take them back up into paradise and restore them to their first estate. Adam and Eve and all of the other patriarchs, they were not being born over multiple lifetimes and different embodiments. They lived one lifetime in the flesh, and when they died, they were there in Abraham's bosom, awaiting for Messiah to descend down there and to set the captives free, to bring liberty to the captives. And that's exactly what he did. And then we see in the story in the Gospel of Nicodemus that even the thief on the cross was told that day, "This day you will be with me in paradise." He waited for Christ to go down into Sheol and to bring Adam and all of his righteous descendants out of their prison in their, where they were being held. confined. And he took them back up into paradise. They were the first fruits, the resurrected first fruits that were brought before the Father. Christ was the high priest of the Melchizedek order. He brought them as the first fruits before the Father. They were baptized in the Arturian lake. Then they were allowed to enter into paradise, the city of God, New Jerusalem, which is above the vaulted dome of the earth. When they did so, they encountered the thief who told them the story of how he was with the Messiah and that he recognized with the signs in the heavens and all the earth, the earthquakes, the renting of the veil. There were many, many earthquakes during that time, and even the sun was darkened for 3 hours. So he recognized that Christ was the true Messiah, the Son of God. And so then he was there in paradise waiting for them. He told them that story. They entered into New Jerusalem, and there they found Enoch and Elijah. And Enoch and Elijah told them the story that they were translated and they had never died, and that they were going to be preserved to be the two witnesses for Revelation 11. And during the time of the Antichrist, then they would come here to the earth to accuse the adversary and to let the people know that he was truly the Antichrist and not the Christ. And then they would die. They would be murdered by him in the streets of Jerusalem. Their bodies left for 3.5 days in the streets. The New World Order elites would celebrate, but then they would be resurrected and taken back up into heaven. And so that's the story. So Enoch and Elijah, neither them nor any of us are coming multiplied in lifetime and being reincarnated over and over and over. We spiritually existed before our flesh embodiment, but we only come into the flesh one time. And when we die, we go before the Most High in judgment. And then we are, that determination, the judgment of whether we are deserving or heaven or hell occurs, and our spirits go there. And we stay there until what will be the judgment at the time of the end, when we are reunited with our bodies. And everybody is brought before the great white throne judgment, before the Messiah. And we are all judged for the lives that we lived at that time.
Give me a little scary what you just said about the two witnesses being killed and the New World Order celebrating and being happy about it. And it just takes me to the news of our time, where the CEO of that pharmaceutical company gets shot and people are actually celebrating. And and that the thought is slowly changing about that. What do you guys think? For me, it just seems like it's something just emanating and starting to go in that direction.
About people celebrating others
Celebrating
dying.
death, like
Other
that.
people died. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the scriptures say that in this time, everything would be turned upside down, and the celebration of death would be something that the world embraces, because it's all twisted. And then also, you have these leftists, the liberals, that celebrate the murder of children.
Right.
And that's absolutely insanity. But yet, that's what they do, and that is a sign that we are in the end.
Right, Zen, I'm gonna run something over by you, because I appreciate what you were saying about the pre-Adamite world, and I always wanted to see if I could throw a few things that maybe it might jive and it might actually be a potential for some of the research that I did compared to what you've done, and maybe collaborating it somehow. My question could be to you is, as far as the Nephilim falling in the world before us and the first world, I totally agree and understand with that. And could there have been, like Samael himself, being forced to be the angel of death to help destroy the previous world? If you think about it, maybe that was one of his punishments for bringing him and the rebellious third down. That's just a thought. And as we go into it a little bit farther, into this present age, I was thinking, because again, with a lot of these sources that talk about the angels looking at Adam being created in Adam's position as viceroy of the garden, etc., and not wanting to follow him, could there have been, like right before he was created, etc., could there have been another demotion for these angels? Even farther. I know they were probably, as you said, they were probably demoted back in the previous age. But could there have been a second demotion when, of course, and that what you talked about with Jesus and with the Messiah being presented out there, and they're not wanting any part of that? But that would be the pre-Adamite demotion. But could there have been another one where God decided to bring lowly Adam there, a person of dust, to be the leader of the garden and the viceroy there? Could these same groups have said, no, we don't want any part of that either. We're not gonna be underneath Adam? And could there have been another demotion for those under Samael and those under the serpent, like those Nephilim that were already on the earth, or maybe they got demoted to the earth?
Have you ever read the Keber Nagast, chapter 100?
Yes.
I have it. I don't know if I read that exact part. I do a lot of skipping through. Why? What does it say?
Well, you should read that, because
What is it?
it tells the story of the Watchers. And the Watchers were not an evil group of angels. They were actually the servants of the Most High. And they were there, as you said, they were the angels that were tasked with tending the garden along with Adam. And in the story in the Keber Nagast, chapter 100, when Adam and Eve were tempted by the Samael, the serpent, and beguiled, and they fell. The Watchers went to the word of the Lord, Christ, and basically tattletaled on him and said that, here you gave him one commandment and he fell anyways. And, so why? And then the whole thing of, why are you mindful of man? And then Christ told him that he was made of 4 elements, and that if they were made of the same, that they would have committed sin even worse than he did. And so in the Keber Nagast, the Watchers challenged the word of the Lord, Christ, to put them into flesh and allow them to send here to the earth. And they were supposed to, they took an oath that they would serve humanity and help to remind humanity of where we had fallen from. As it says in Revelation 2, remember from whence thou art fallen. And so they were tasked with that. And so Christ told them, and he warned them that, I'm going to allow you to do this, but don't get out of line. Don't fall into sin. And in the Keber Nagast, it tells the story of how they descended here to the earth, and they found the daughters of Cain engaging in an orgy with, the other children of Cain. And they had painted their eyelids, they had scented themselves. And so the Watchers, they knew that if they were tempted and if they engaged in the carnality, which they were now in mortal flesh, male bodies. And so lust was very real for them. And they then decided to make a pact, the mutual imprecations, which it speaks about in the book of Enoch. And they agreed to stay the course, even though they knew that there was going to be severe consequences brought onto them for engaging in this lustful act and these behaviors, this sinful nature. But they did it anyways. And so that was why the Most High brought severe judgment against them. And just as the rebel angels, the insurgent angels, they were placed under the authority of death, so were the watchers. They also lost their immortal status and they lost their privilege to be eternal beings. And they also were placed under the authority of death. 9/10 of them were gathered, as it says in the book of Jubilees, and they were already confined. But a limited amount of them were allowed to remain on the earth to serve with Legion and to try to accomplish the whole New World Order agenda. Because the New World Order, it's not about, even though, yeah, it's about, they want to establish world government. They want to create a one world order, a one world political, religious, economic system. That's not the end goal. The end goal of the New World Order is to establish this world order so that they can then hand it over to the Antichrist. And the whole idea for Satan is that, as he said in Isaiah 14, he wanted to exalt his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, in the sides of the north, above the mouth of the congregation, and to be like the Most High. The whole idea and the whole objective of the New World Order is to divert worship of the Most High to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is the plan of the New World Order. And it's to bring forth the Antichrist and the religion of the Antichrist, which is to destroy the Christian values and belief systems that are connected to Yahuwah, to Elohim, to the Ruach, and to the Son. And they want to steal that worship for themselves. So the whole idea of establishing the New World Order is to create this false pagan religion and belief system and to have people worship them as being like the Most High. And so read the Keber Nagast, chapter 100. It will explain to you the details of the second incursion and why it was that they fell. And yeah, it had to do with the creation of Adam and their refusal to be a servant unto him. But they wanted, like the rebel angels and legion before them, they wanted kingdoms of their own to rule over. They would rather serve to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. And so that's the story of both the rebel angels and the watchers. And if people want to know more about the fullness of the story, because it is very in depth, and there are many sources which confirm this whole tale that I'm telling you. You can read the Great Contest 1 and 2, The War in Heaven. The second one is The Enmity Between the Seed Lines. And one of the two-part book series that I recently released on the Pre-Adamites. The Pre-Adamites and the Antediluvian World, and the Dragon Lords, the Antediluvian Kings. Those two books will help explain the prior times and how the war in heaven is completely separate from the Watcher rebellion that took place during the time of Yared, Enoch's father. It's very important that you understand these two timelines and also these two incursions, because it will help you to make sense of the fullness of what we see as mythology and religion and oral traditions, conspiracy, everything, prophecy. It will all fit into alignment with this teaching once you are able to understand it.
Yeah, thank you, Zen. There's a quick question in the chat of what you were just describing, Zen, from Gene Hess. He's asking, when you say the second death, does that mean to cease to exist?
I do believe so. Yeah,
Hmm.
I do believe it is to be annihilated, because it says that, when they harm the innocent, harm the children, it says that it would be better for them to have never been born than
Right,
to commit such sin. And so the second death, in my opinion, is annihilation. Because, what is death? Death is annihilation
right.
of, what was our former uh, way of being.
Right. There's another question in the chat from Tammy George, and it's kind of going along with these end times occurrences that you both have been describing. So I don't know if you wanted, it might be kind of a lengthy answer, but she's wondering why would Satan be allowed to be loosed for that little season for 1,000 years? If Judgment Day's already happened, all of this, what would be the reasoning behind that? I'm just interested in your opinions on that.
That's a great question.
Hmm.
In my opinion, it's in the same way that this world age is our second chance, our opportunity to realign ourselves with the Most High. In the same way, I believe that the Most High is going to give the wicked, those that miss their chance, that will be left behind when we are raptured up and caught away. I believe that the little season and the challenge of the millennial age is that there will be another portion of humanity, and there will be, because in Second Ezra it speaks about women giving birth even during the millennial age. I
Right.
believe that whereas we will be restored to our bright nature, to our glorified form, and we will not have to take on mortal embodiment, that there is a segment of the population which missing their opportunity during this lifetime and during what is the second world age, that the Most High is going to give everybody one final chance. And during the millennial age, Satan and his being loose for little season, that is going to be the final deception to lead people astray. And if you align with him in that time and you are deceived and led astray and you choose to serve Satan and evil, then you will have the sentence of the second death placed upon you, and you will be annihilated with them at that time. But that God is long suffering. He wants none of us to fall short of the glory and the grace of eternal life that has been extended to all of us from the Messiah dying on the cross. He doesn't want any of the sons of humanity to be deceived with the angels of the Most High that rebelled against him. But we know, according to even what Christ said, I will call you one from 1,000, two from 10,000, which when you break down those numbers and you do the math and apply it to 7 billion people being here on the earth at this time, that's only a few million people being saved.
Hmm.
So I believe that the Most High wants more people to be saved. And so there will be one final opportunity for them to do so.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Zen. Brett, did you have thoughts on that you wanted to share?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as the Kurbaganest, yeah, I remember it now, and that was quite an interesting tale. And they talked about the mountains of the oath, actually Mount Hermon being the mount of the oath, where they took that oath, where they would all be together or not. So yeah, it's an interesting story. What we're talking about here, what you were saying, I wanted to just agree with Zen on that. I believe that it does have to do with temptation at the end times, at the very end times, at the end of that 1,000-year reign, where when you said about women giving birth, I believe that there would be some opportunity. And I actually believe it's for some of the same type of instrumentality that's being used against us today. It's like Antichrist. I believe it's like Christ, but not quite. I believe near the end of that millennium, there will be a little bit of that going on too at the same time. Gog and Magog, which I'm writing about in this even before Christ returns. I believe the same type of systems will be incorporated again at the very end to lead people astray by saying things like, it's okay, it's close to God, it's close to Christ, but it's just a little different. Follow this way. And I believe, as Zen was saying, it'll be up to the people at that very end time to have to make a decision again to choose what's right and to choose something godly.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you. And they're very appreciative in the chat to hear that from both of you.
Yeah.
Good questions.
Okay. Well, we're getting pretty close to the end. That's interesting. That was quite a talk today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
me
it's been a great
too.
show.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And it's nice to see all the community getting involved as well. Everyone's really tracking with both of you. And Brett, I didn't know if you want to share anything else about this chapter that we're going through. We have about 2 minutes left.
2 minutes. What I will do next time, I'm going to continue on absorbing what Zen said, etc., because I like to add in anything new I could learn. I want to just put it into my thoughts and into the whole entire story. So I'm going to continue next time into more of the symbols and talking about the serpent himself, and then get into those stories we talked that I was mentioning with like a lot of Islamic sources and other sources, including the Zohar. I'm not quite sure how to think about the Zohar because some of the thoughts about it, but that bundle of work does talk a lot about the different kind of giants and the different kind of fallen angels that became terrestrial. So have you read of the Zohar a little bit, Zen? Have you got into it a little?
I have them. I have all those.
I have
It's
not.
quite,
I've heard of
it's quite got a lot.
Yeah,
So
it's sort of like the Midrash, the rabbinic oral traditions.
right.
Okay.
Which it's it's interesting. It's more like Kabbalistic type material.
Yeah,
Right,
you're right.
right.
That's why you have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt, because you have to kind of wonder a little bit about where it might direct you, etc. If you take it all wholeheartedly. But the information in there about these giants and about the Nephilim, there is quite a bit of that's something that I use. So I'm going to bring that in next time. We're going to talk a little bit about envy and jealousy and basically how I thought and how some of these texts talk about Adam's creation. And as you were saying, Zen, when you're talking about the Kerbig and Nagas, where these angels having another fall.
Yeah, well, let's actually share that story as well.
Okay.
In going into the whole narrative.
Yeah.
All right,
good.
we are at the end. Thank you, brother. Thank you,
All
Lisa.
right.
Thank you, everybody in the chat.
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Good night, all.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Good
Next
night.
time.
See
Shalom.
you then. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Fire. I take you to burn.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.